What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Blood on the Razor Wire TV, where we bring it to you real and we bring it to you raw. Today, I got a guy on that's been having a bunch of big names on his show. He's blowing up on YouTube, doing some big things. A dude that I respect because his hustle is nonstop. Like, this kid's putting out videos every day, doing all kinds of different stuff. But anyway, Bick, welcome to Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Tell the people who you are, talk a little bit about you.
Thanks for having me, man. It's a real pleasure. My name's Bick. Basically, the shortened version is when I was 18, I owned a nightclub in Connecticut. We did like electronic dance music type events. And then by the time I was 21, I got 3 years in federal prison related to fraud from before the concert business and the nightclub business in relation to like investors and like concert losses that I lied and covered up about before I actually even owned the nightclub. So it was like this big financial mess. The Fed said it was a Ponzi scheme. It was more on my end like an accidental Ponzi scheme. It wasn't intentional, but nonetheless, like it kind of got too big too quickly. And then by the time I was 21, after going to trial and losing half the counts, I was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison.
Ask you this, Ian, how old were you at the time that you actually get sentenced?
I was 21 at the time. That was October 2016. I had just turned 21.
You were 21, getting ready to go to prison for 3 years. I want to know what your life was like as a kid growing up before we actually take you to the prison, right?
It was like a pretty good childhood, a middle-class family. My dad was in the catering business. He was a retired New York City public schools teacher. My mom was a massage therapist and did some other type of like psychology work. I had a younger brother and we did like family vacations. We were in public school. And then for a few years, we were in private school too, Montessori school. I got bullied a lot, kind of like in elementary school. And that, which is one of the reasons why I went to private school. And then I left private school by 8th grade so I can go to a public high school so I could be social, interact with kids my age, because the private school is very small. They had like 4th through 8th grade in one classroom. So I left early to go to the public high school, which had like 3,000 kids. And that's kind of how I got exposed to like throwing parties and becoming like that popular kid.
Let me ask you this. Where did you grow up at? Was it in the city? Was it in Connecticut? Where'd you grow up actually?
I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut, actually right down the road from where the Danbury FCI is.
Did you kind of know about that prison being there as a kid?
Not really. I think the first time we were exposed to it was when I think Martha Stewart went to prison, like when I was really young, and they were talking about how she might go there, and that was like the first time I knew about it. Other than that, it was kind of just like on the back of my mind until like the Orange is the New Black series came out, which was based on the Danbury prison.
Now you're on your way to prison. You got a 3 year sentence. Not too bad, but you know, for a young kid, 21 years old, that's never been exposed to that life or jail, I mean, it had to be going through your mind. You had to be a little bit like, damn, I'm going to prison. What were you feeling?
It was pretty surreal. Like it was pretty scary. I was not planning on getting jail time. Like I had my bond revoked because I was going out of state to gamble. This was after the trial, like a month before scheduling was our sentencing was scheduled. And my friends wanted to take the nightclub from me and become the owners. So they snitched me out to the FBI that I was going out of state. The reason why I was going out of state is because to gamble, you had to be a certain age in Connecticut. And I wasn't that age yet. So I was going to New York and my friends found out about it, snitched me out to the feds. I got my bond revoked and spent 21 days in a detention center in Rhode Island, a private detention center. And I thought that that was like going to be my prison sentence. And then that was my learning lesson. So I was trying to tell the judge all that. He wasn't necessarily buying it. And then when I got 36 months, I'm sitting there like, how many years is 36 months? Because when you hear 36 months, you're not like, when you hear the number of months, you don't really calculate how many years it is because we don't talk like that in the real world.
So, you know, you do that little couple days in the county jail. What's that like for you? You know, white kid, you know, that you said used to get picked on in school. What's that county jail like in Rhode Island?
The detention center wasn't too bad. It was like kind of like something that you would see in like 60 Days In. You have the two tiers. In the center is like all the chow hall tables. You have like that basketball court outside for like the rec yard. You're locked in your cell like throughout the count times and at night, and you're just really stuck in this unit. So I'm sitting there like, wow, is this how I'm going to spend the next, 3 years? You just I had no idea what the federal prison system was really like, or prison in general, because I hadn't prepared for that part at all. So it was really interesting to see. But the thing about the detention centers is there's no guys that are sentenced or anything. So there's no paperwork checking. There's nothing like that. Half of them are rats or snitching on their cases. You don't know who's who, and everyone's just kind of like fighting their case and waiting. They're in like the waiting period.
All right, so now you're on your way to federal prison. What's the first prison you go to?
After I stopped at Brooklyn MDC, I went to Vortex, the low security prison in New Jersey.
I mean, it's a low security prison, but there's a lot of stuff happening over there, right?
Oh man, I had never been to college before, but if I had to say I went to college, it would be Fort Dix. Like, this compound's huge. It's like an old army barracks. There's different units. It's literally nothing like you've ever seen before when it comes to prison and TV. There's 12-man rooms, 6 bunk beds. There's no locks or anything on the doors, just a lock on the unit. And you're free to roam around like these 3 floors. There's a lot of bathrooms. There's a pool room. There's a little gym room, and then there's a giant chow hall in another building. There's a library in another one. There's all these different things, and there's so many things going on. All these different guys have different hustles. They have different ways to make money. Everyone's just involved in everything. There's a lot of corruption. There's cell phones. I think they said like Fort Dix is one of like the biggest cell phone compounds in the prison system.
It might be shocking for some people to hear this, but they actually had a SO case that came out of there. All these dudes had cell phones, all these dudes that were sex offenders. They ended up with cell phones over there, and a bunch of them ended up with another 15, 20 years. Did you know about that?
Oh, that is so funny, because so that happened while I was there. We got raided. You know how like the feds do the quarterly raids where they empty the buildings? We thought that what was happening that day. And then all of a sudden we see FBI agents in tactical vests and was like swarming the compound one day and shutting down all the units. And they were like really focused on one unit. They had like the drug sniffing dogs. They had all this stuff going on. And we came to find out, like, it was on the news that these like 5 or 6 people that were already doing over a decade in prison were running this ring for, child pornography, and they were selling it on SIM cards out of the library. You would go and you would request like a certain book, and you would get these cards. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, but then months later, when I was in the SHU and then awaiting transfer, I ended up in the Philly Detention Center, and they sold me up with one of the guys that was a part of the ring. I didn't know he was a part of this ring until afterwards. We didn't have any paperwork or anything. I'm in the SHU with him, but I found out I was living with one of the guys for 2 months in the SHU that was involved in this ring. He was just finishing an 8-year sentence, and now I looked him up when I got out. He got another 15 years from that. It's insane.
So when people hear like a low security prison Fort Dix, they think, oh, it's probably all right. They're not too much trouble. But I mean, they had some stabbings over there, all kinds of stuff, right?
Vortex is pretty dangerous. I mean, because when you think about it, you have 400 men in one unit, and the security ranges, like, there could be guys that are there for serious crimes, for murder or whatever, or anything. As long as they get below that, I think it's that 20-year threshold, or whatever the requirement is to get to a low. Like, you could have a public safety factor and be at a low security prison. So you had fraud guys like me, and then you could have someone that's like a violent criminal, so to say, in the same unit, and there's one guard watching this unit, and he's shelled up downstairs on the bottom floor. So it's super dangerous. I mean, I've heard some crazy stories about things that have happened to chomos there and just people in general.
I had a homeboy that was over there, and then he ended up getting caught with a cell phone, and then he came to Raybrook. He told me he would walk around sometimes on commissary day and go in like these rooms and be like, hey, man, get something to put in my bag. He'd have like the sex offender dudes. This guy, I get a bag of rice from him, a summer sausage from him, a mackerel from him. I mean, was it really like that?
I didn't personally see that, but I know like guys had like sex offenders would pay to stay, I guess you could say. I mean, the sex offenders at Fort Dix were very well protected by the administration. It's a heavily sex offender compound, but you would see situations where, like, if a sex offender was living in someone's room, they would make that guy clean the room every day, and he couldn't be inside the room between the hours of like 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. He would clean it, mop the floor, organize the shoes, everything, and then bam, he's got to go to the library or sit somewhere else. So you would see things like that, and then there would be like payments people would be making. You would always, on commissary days, you would always see so many, like 100 different transactions going down. Like, people that owed people from store day or spotted or gambling debts or anything like that.
Let's talk a little bit about the SOs, right? Like you said, they had to leave their room. They weren't allowed to stay in there. They weren't allowed to take a nap. Yo, you got to leave the room from 8 until bedtime. You're only here to sleep. You wake up in the morning, you clean the cell, and get your ass out of here. I mean, some people don't realize that that's what's going on over there in them places.
Yeah, 100%. And they're not going to snitch because they don't want to leave the compound because there's so many sex offenders that they're all like, I would be walking the compound. You can kind of always tell because one, they'd have like their own chow hall tables. They had like 6 of their own chow hall tables because there's just so many of them. I would like make a TikTok video about it and people are like, oh, they don't, sex offenders don't get their own tables. But when you see this compound, I mean, there's 5,000 inmates on the compound. So of course, if a lot of them are sex offenders, they're going to need their own table. But you would see them in the yard playing like Dungeons and Dragons. They'd be like waving their imaginary wands around. You would see a lot of that. It's just wild. Like they're all over the place.
I ended up in a low in Lexington my last 9 months. And when I got there, I was just like shocked at, the way that, these things went and how these people were treated, what they did, how they lived their lives. Did they have their own TV over there?
The sex offenders. So the sex offenders shared the TVs. I mean, we had like 5 or 6 TVs in the TV room, one for sports, one for reality TV, one for news, etc. I think the only rule, like I saw in the Danbury prison, the only rule was they weren't allowed to have their own seat, like bring their chair to the front of the room. They had to sit in the back of the room. At Fort Dix, I know every unit was different, but in my unit, some of the sex offenders had their own seats in different areas. It really depended on what their like status was. There would be some that like were integral to the economy, like they would be hustling something for them out of the kitchen, or they would be doing a certain thing. So they were kind of just like fit into the ecosystem and guys tolerated. Not that they thought that what they did was okay, but they would tolerate it and allow them to be there. But you saw a lot of that. And then also you would see a lot of them like sit there during the day and watch TV because that's when they could change their own channels. Because at night the TV room's packed, but during the day it's empty because it's only with the guys that aren't working or on medical or whatever, and they can flip through their own channels.
Were you shocked at, some of the people that were there that were sex offenders? Because I mean, I ended up in that low. There was a dude over there that was, he was the chief of police at one time in Louisiana, and now he's in prison. Were you shocked to be like, damn, that dude's a SO?
Yeah, there would be certain individuals you would never expect. I mean, like there's the classic guy with the missing teeth, creepy glasses like that. I expected all the time. But there were some shocking ones. Like there were some young guys I met that turned out to be sex offenders. There was some like, clean cut middle-aged men that looked like Wall Street bankers that turned out to be sex offenders. And then you have like your classic grandpa that turned out to be a sex offender. So you really have no idea like who was there for what until you really saw their paperwork. And then you're like, oh shit, I didn't realize. And like on the flip side, that's how people treated me because they all thought I was a sex offender, but I was far from it.
Do you think you got that label because of the glasses? You're white, you're young.
Yeah, I definitely did. I mean, I was a lot chubbier. I had the glasses. I had really long, like thick hair. Like I looked like a chick kind of. And I said like I said I was there for fraud. And they didn't believe that because one, there's really rarely any kids, or they thought I was at least 18, that are in federal prison for fraud. There's a lot of state cases, but not federal. So they didn't believe that off the bat. And I didn't know that they weren't going to believe that. And I just like, I fit the type. I looked young. They didn't see me as like someone that would have been there for drugs or guns or anything like that. So I just got labeled as that.
So, as soon as you walk into that place, what is it like? Do they approach you immediately over there at Fort Dix? Like, hey, the white dudes approach you? Does someone approach you?
I actually never got approached. And I think that was like part of my problem. Like this came up like when I had gotten into some shit and like these guys tried to extort me from another car, and I was hanging out with a lot of guys at the New York car, and they're like, they brought up this whole meeting. They're like, why the fuck did no one check this kid's paperwork? Why did no one like call him or claim him or anything? And I had no idea going in. Like if I had to do this all over again, I would immediately go to whoever the car was, show them my paperwork, but I didn't know any of that. So for like 4 months, I'm walking around this compound doing whatever. trying to get involved in anything, gambling, contraband, whatever, just to like keep busy and stuff. And I'm ruffling a lot of feathers by doing that. So they never asked for my paperwork. No one came up to me. No one gave me a care package. It wasn't until like I got to Danbury where I was treated like that after I'd already learned like the system and everything. But at Fort Dix, I got none of that. And I think it's probably because people just figured I was a sex offender and never went up to approach me. And there's also like the amount of white guys. I think it's Fort Dix is a predominantly like black compound. There wasn't that many, good solid white guys that were coming and approaching me.
Talk about that car that tried to extort you. Who was it? What car?
That was the Maryland car, Maryland, Baltimore. I think they called themselves the Baltimore car. I mean, it's the same thing, but yeah, there were these guys that came down. They were kind of like lone wolves. You always have like a couple lone guys that are protected by the car, but they like run on their own. They had just gotten down, their points just dropped, and they just got to the low. They were a few weeks in, and coming from a medium security prison, they're looking at me like I'm fresh meat. I mean, these are guys that were in pens, high security prisons, and they're just getting to this low, and this is a whole new compound. Like there's no they're seeing how people are moving around, they're seeing how accessible cell phones are, so they're looking at me, a kid with a cell phone, and they're getting jealous right off the bat. They're like, well, this shit wouldn't fly in like a medium security prison, this kid running without a car doing whatever he wants. So that's when they like came at me about that. But these guys were causing a lot of ruckus on the compound because they were trying to implement.
They were white dudes, right? From Maryland?
No, they were black guys. Yeah, they were black guys, and they were just like causing a lot of issues on the compound because they were just bringing like a different type of thinking. They were being like too hot for the scene. And I think what happened was eventually someone planted cell phones on them because one day they just got picked up in like a big investigation. Cell phones were found. It was like a whole big thing. I think people just wanted to get rid of them. And that's a lot of shit you see at Fort Dix all the time. Like I would always check my bed at night just to make sure, or whenever they called like a raid or something, because people are throwing phones on people's beds all the time.
Them dudes were kind of doing too much too fast.
Definitely. I agreed. And that can really get you into some shit in prison.
Being that you're from New York, Connecticut area, what made these dudes think that they could just press you? I mean,
I think it was just the way I was carrying myself. Like I wasn't running with anyone. I think it was kind of known that I didn't have like a group or car and that my paperwork wasn't checked. And I was just like this, young white little nerdy kid. I did not look intimidating. I looked super young, and they took advantage of that. And I'm not really a fighter. I'm not a confrontational person. Like probably looking back on it, I should have just swung at him right away and then asserted my dominance. But I was new in prison. I was just trying to get home. I wasn't trying to get into anything.
that's the best recourse. Always swing and deal with it later, especially if you're not fucked up. Your paperwork's good. You're not a chomo. You can go anywhere. And you know what? You probably would have flourished better in an FCI or even a pen. I mean, depending on what's going on. So, how do these dudes try to extort you? What is it? Do they like press up on, yo, what's up, man? On commissary day, they pull a knife on you. How's it go? Tell the people. I mean, I know how it goes in a lot of instances. Some of the viewers do.
So I was walking down the hallway and they yanked me into the bathroom, and they like grabbed my shirt. But one guy's watching the door, the other guy's the one pressing me, and he's like, "So here's this number. I need you to put." It was like $1,200 or $1,500 on his books that he wanted sent because he was trying to get a cell phone. These are guys that don't have any money, and they see Fort Dix and they see everyone has a cell phone, so they tried me. They were like, "We want to get a cell phone." I'm like, "No." And right away, dude slaps me, like slaps the glasses right off my face. Doesn't break them or anything, doesn't leave a mark, but just slaps me like open handed. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like my head's ringing. And he's like, yo, have my shit. And then I was like, well, I'm going to need some time. I can't just, call home, say I need 1,200 bucks. So I was stalling, and it was like a week where like they were doing a lot of raids. So no one was really out on cell phones or anything like that. And then like a few days later, because those guys were doing it to not only to me, to multiple people. So they were getting really hot and causing a lot of issues. So a few days later, they got picked up in an investigation and they were gone.
What was going through your mind when the dude slaps you? Are you like, damn, I probably should fight back? I mean, what's going through your mind?
I just want to get out of that situation alive, because I saw what some of these guys were carrying. Like these guys that came from the higher security prisons were carrying like steel rods like this, like down their pants. And that's just what they were walking around with. And I get like that's how they needed to live at like the higher security prisons, but this is a low security prison. But a lot of guys are strapped up like that. So, and these are the guys that, those guys that never change into shorts or wear flip flops or anything. These are guys that are always in their khaki pants, always wearing their boots, like they're on go time all the time. Those are the guys you got to watch out for.
Let me ask you a serious question, right? When this dude slaps you, I know you just want to get out of, that situation. Do you feel like less of a man when this dude slaps you, bro?
Yeah, I mean, like I felt pretty degraded. Like I was like upset, like I wanted to cry, but I couldn't cry in that situation. But I'm 21. I've never been to prison before, and here I am. Like I'm thinking I'm about to die or get shanked or something because it happens. And it was just like it was definitely like a surreal, scary moment. My only instinct at that point is just to like try to talk my way out of it and get out of there because that's what I knew how to do. I wasn't a fighter, but I could talk.
There's some young dudes watching this show right now, and they're like, they might be caught up in some stuff, might be some SOs caught up in some stuff, and they don't realize that this is really how it works. That this is really federal prison. You got wolves and you got zebras, even at a low. These dudes look at you and they're like, "Yo, we're about to press this cat. We're about to get some." And I'm sure in their room they're telling you, we're about to make it happen." So in your mind, when you tell them, "Hey, I gotta, I need a couple days," are you really thinking like, "Damn, I'm gonna send these cats some bread so they leave me alone"?
No, I knew mentally I couldn't send them the money because then it was going to be over. Like it was going to be fucked. They're going to always, once you do it once, you're going to keep doing it. And like the thing was that I found out quickly is like my cellmates, I thought like were the boys, turned out to not be because when I bring them the situation, they're like, "That's on you. We don't want to get involved, this and that." Like no one wanted to help me, and I'm just like trying to figure it out. So I just kept stalling. I was like, "Oh, I couldn't get on a phone. I couldn't rent a phone. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that." And then just stalling, trying to figure out what my next move was. And then they got picked up. And it was like a whole big thing because they weren't just doing it to me. They were fucking with some guys in the New York car. It became a whole thing. There was like a big meeting. And then that's when like everything went down. This all happened like within the same week.
I think I seen a thumbnail on your channel where it talked about paying for protection. I didn't watch the video. Did you ever have to pay for protection in there?
So I mean, it's a really like a debatable thing of whether it was actually like physically paying for protection or whatever. But what happened was like during this time period, I was befriending like some of the guys in the New York car, and we were getting like really close friends. And we still talk to this day. And they were fucked up; they didn't have any money, so I would give them like 30, 40, 50 bucks a week for commissary, like whatever they needed. They would give me a list. One guy was heavily in gambling debts, so I helped pay it off for him. And what happened was he was they just like looked after me. When guys would see that someone was fucking with me and they would be like, "Nah, that's my boy, like fuck off, his paperwork straight." And I think what happened was people were looking at me as a hustle. Like they figured these guys are hustling me. I'm like their stang or bitch or whatever, and people left me alone at that point. So that's where like the paying for protection aspect comes in.
Did that happen after the extortion attempt?
Around at the same time, they didn't really want to get involved in that situation, but it covered me for future situations while I was there. No one bothered me after that point. After these Baltimore guys were off the compound and I'm starting to, roll with these other guys, then it was all good.
The New York dudes, I mean, black dudes, white car, black car, what is it?
New York is mostly black, and it was the guys were black that I was dealing with.
Do you feel like people targeted you because you were white?
I think definitely being white plays a factor, and being young. I don't know if it was necessarily like I hate white people mentality. I think it was just like because I was white, I looked like an easier target. I think that's
I'm
more
not,
what it
I'm
played.
not saying it in that way because I've been there. I know what it is. I mean, I think the perception is, hey, man, this young white boy, man, he's got some money, and we're about to get some of it. I mean, that's just how it is. That's what happens. Doesn't always happen like that in the penitentiary because most people in there are just, they're there for a reason and they're going to get busy. But when you make it to these lows, which I spent 9 months in a low, I've seen people target people, and I'm actually going to do a video about one of them. And it's not on no racial shit. We're just telling it what it is, bro. People start, "Oh man, you want some?" No, man, this is what it is. So eventually you end up in the shoe and you get transferred, right?
Yeah, we got caught up in a cell phone investigation. Our room got raided. They found cell phones. There was like videos of all of us on there. So in those situations, they like take everyone got put in the shoe, and that was my first time ever in like solitary or the shoe before, and that shit fucking sucked. I did almost 6 months in the shoe.
And then you get transferred over to Danbury eventually after you sit in the shoe. I know the shoe sucks, but I want to talk about Danbury. You get to Danbury. What's the first day like?
Well, so I only lasted on the compound for a day. It's actually a funny story, but I get to the compound and I'm treated with like open arms. I knew a lot of people because I'm from Danbury. Some of the Italian guys were coming up to me that were like from Danbury, and they saw I was white, and they saw us from Connecticut because the Danbury prison is mostly all Connecticut guys, whereas New Jersey, it's mostly New York and New Jersey cars. But in Danbury, the Connecticut car is predominant. My case was well known in Danbury, and the guards, of course, said, "Hey, guess who's coming to the compound? This and that." So they gave me a care package. Everything was good. They had already ran my paperwork, and I was like, "Wow, I'm gonna like this spot." And there's no cells or dorms. It's like one big open dorm with all the bunk beds scattered across the unit. And like I got in on the yard at like 3 p.m. on whatever day, and then 9 a.m. the next morning, I'm called to the lieutenant's office. And everyone knows like getting called to the lieutenant's office is the worst. And I get there, and they're like, "Are you Ian Bick?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they said my number, and I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Put your hands against the wall." They searched me, cuffed me up, and brought me the shoe. And I had just gotten out of the shoe after all these months, and I'm like, "What the fuck is this about?" Comes to find out that one of the guards on the compound I knew on a personal level. I dated his cousin. He came over for dinner multiple times, and he reported a conflict of interest. He was like a super cop because other guards on the compound actually used to work for me at the nightclub as bouncers. But this guy reported it, and they put me under investigation. And they said they were going to ship me out because of my relationship with him.
What happens then? Do you leave Danbury?
So they leave me in the shoe for 3 months while like this whole thing, they're dragging their feet. And then they put me through diesel therapy. I mean, like at the same time, like my parents were calling every day. We had a state senator called, like we were ruffling feathers. But they ended up dropping my points to a camp. But instead of sending me to a local camp, they send me all the way out to Wisconsin. They put me on Con Air. I go to Chicago. I go to Oklahoma City. And I finally make it to Wisconsin for my last year at this camp.
So you're at the camp, Oxford, a pretty nice. I mean, people always say Oxford's one of the places you really want to go. I mean, was it nice there?
Yeah, so I always heard like Otisville was the spot, the Otisville prison camp. Like that's really nice. But this Oxford prison camp, dude, this thing was sweet, man. 100 inmates, 4-man pods, but it's equipped to hold like 200. So not every bunk is filled. Um, there's no fence. It's literally nothing like you ever experienced. There's a basketball court. There's an inside basketball court too. Outside, there's a tennis court. There's a bocce ball court. There's a volleyball court. There's a track. Visiting with your visits, you don't get searched in or out. You just get like patted down occasionally. There's no more strip searching. You could sit outside with your family member. It's like this big. It's like a community house basically. There's 4 different TV rooms.
No
It's really
Baltimore,
nice.
no Baltimore dudes trying to extort you over there, right?
No, man, there's no such thing as checking paperwork at the camp. Like the rats roam. At camps, there's a lot of rats and snitches. So they're just like, it's normal. It's a normal business. No one's checking anyone. Everyone's just, they don't want to leave the camp. I mean, there was guys that with points so low, they would get caught with a cell phone and then let back on the compound the next day. At one point, it was so sweet because they didn't want to ship anyone because it's in the middle of nowhere. They're just giving you a ticket for it. If you get caught with a cell phone, they're taking it away, no shoe time. Because they have a medium security prison right next to the camp. So a lot of the times that shoe was filled. But it was a sweet compound, man. I mean, we were eating McDonald's, pizza, Burger King, sushi some weekends, tacos. It was crazy.
Life had finally got better, but eventually you get out of prison, right? And I know that I think you were on Vice News, HBO. You've done a bunch of big interviews. You get out of prison. What's your mindset when you get out of prison? What do you want to do?
The first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to get back into the nightclub business. Like I was plotting my whole time in prison in the shoe. Like I had a lot of time to think, and I'm like, all right, I want to get back in the nightclub business. I figured that's my redemption story to like make things right and my career and what exactly I wanted to do. And I quickly realized it wasn't going to be possible. I mean, one, I didn't have the money to do it. Two, the optics of it weren't that great. And it wasn't the right game plan. So I ended up working for Whole Foods. I started as a hot bar cook in 2019. making 15 an hour. And I worked my way all the way to the top, to a team leader of the prepared foods department. And before I quit, I was making 32 an hour with overtime. It was almost 100K a year. They had me open up a store in Long Island with them. I did all these different things. And like, that was my life for 3 years, the whole time I was on supervised release.
How does the YouTube thing start? Because I mean, you got a pretty big channel with a lot of subscribers. How does that get started?
So last year in like July, I woke up and I'm like, is Whole Foods what I want to do for the rest of my life? Like, I was losing that passion, because the thing with corporate is like, it burns you out to the point where like you can excel at a very high level and other people aren't excelling to that level, but you're still getting paid the same as them or less. Like, there's no appreciation, and you can only move up as fast as they want you to move up. So I'm like, well, I'm young. I'm 27 years old. Now's the time to take a risk. I have no family, no kids. I'm never going to pay back the restitution working at Whole Foods for the rest of my life. What am I going to pay, 5-10 grand a year? So there's got to be more for me out there. And as soon as I had that thinking, I put my 2 weeks in. And at this time, I'm starting on TikTok because my friends have been, pushing me. They said, you got to get on TikTok. And I remember my 5th video on TikTok did 1.2 million views. And while this is going on, I'm listening to Gary Vee, the entrepreneur, and he's saying, guys, get on YouTube Shorts, get on YouTube Shorts. And every TikTok I posted, I'm putting on my YouTube Shorts. And for months, it was, 50, 100 views, nothing ever big for months, like 3-4 months. And then in like October, one went viral and did like 3 million views. And then I got more traction between August and January. I had about 3,000 subscribers. Then come January of this year or late December of last year, I'm thinking to myself, I can't tell my story forever. Like my story, because up until that point, I'm just talking about my story and me. So how do I see the long-term vision of this? Because my story is not going to hold for years and years and years. So that's when I got the idea to do the Locked In with Ian Bick podcast, drop my first long-form video on YouTube. I knew I wanted to be different in the sense where a lot of podcasts are just audio. I wanted to do video too. And between January and now, I mean, I've gone up 67,000 subscribers. We just hit 70K this morning. We have the audio version that's doing about, 15,000 downloads a week. And we're just like growing this brand on all platforms, my Instagram, my TikTok, my Facebook, everything, and just like grinding. And that's like my full-time gig now.
That's what's up. I went down there, I met with you, we did a little interview, and I appreciate you bringing me down there, but straight business, bro. I mean, you're an intelligent dude. You're young, got your whole life ahead of you. And now, I see that you are blowing up 70,000 subscribers. It took me forever, bro, and I was putting out content every single day. But you know what? In anything that you do, you got to work hard. You work hard, you see results. But you know what, Ian, I definitely appreciate you coming on. And, where can people find you, and tell people about your YouTube channel real quick, and we'll get ready to close out.
They could just go to ianbick.com. It has the links to everything. My YouTube channel is Ian Bick CT. We post, 2 full episodes a week. We do like the long format interviews. We have your episode coming out this week, which we're really excited about. And give us a subscribe, check us out, see if you like the content.
Listen, man, I definitely appreciate you. I'm gonna tell everybody, if you like what we're doing, Blood on the Razor Wire TV, with respect. Until tomorrow, we're out.